Hi, good morning, everybody. This is Lisa Conley at Child Care Resources in Seattle, and I hope everybody's doing okay. I'm going to try to unmute you all so we could do some introductions, but let me see if that's going to work or not. I'm having some difficulties with doing that. Anyway, it looks like we've got about 6 folks in addition to me that are logged on currently, and just want to make sure that you can all hear me. So go ahead and just let me know if you're having any difficulties. You can type questions or concerns in the question box, and I will try once again to see if I can unmute everybody. This would be nice if you have the capacity to talk either via phone or microphone attached to your computer. We could be able to do that. But so how about didn't work again. So anyway, we'll go ahead and good morning, folks. And if somebody could just type something in the question box, I can know that you're hearing me and everything is going okay from your end out there. Great. Sounds like great. And there's a question about, is there a video too? So hopefully you can see my screen, and there should be first page of the of the um, of the PowerPoint presentation. It should be there. And let me just double check that. Okay. So it looks like we might have some challenges with the microphones and such like that, but don't let that stop you from just going ahead and typing questions in the question box, and I'll take some pauses throughout our time this morning too. Um, So thanks so much for joining in. Again, I'm Lisa Conley with Child Care Resources with the Kaleidoscope Play and Learn program here, and we're going to just do a, a very simple overview of what the program is. I know that you've been working with Diana and some other folks in Southern Oregon about getting information about the Kaleidoscope program and thinking about whether or not it would be a good fit for your communities. So we're going to do this as a little preview and let you think about any questions that you might have, and have some time to think about it, and then I think we'll regroup again sometime to see if indeed this seems like a good fit programmatically for your communities, and then we'll work together with Diane and folks there to make that decision. And if so, we'll come to visit you sometime in the near future and do a full 2-day training for facilitators. So feel free to type those questions in the question box, and feel free to contact me or Diane Conrad if you have any questions following the webinar as well. I'm happy to answer questions you have about the program. So we'll get started here. So, oops. Oops. Sorry, we're having technical difficulties here. Um, Trying to move. There we go. Okay, good, good. So what is Kaleidoscope Play and Learn? And the real short answer of it is that they are facilitated play groups for young children and their parents and caregivers. And they get together and play, and the children learn about whatever it is that the facilitator has decided that what kind of skills they might be targeted to be using and learning. And then the caregivers and parents are learning about things that they can do at home to support children's child development and early learning. So just a very brief history about the program. We started this in about 2006, and it really grew out of our work with Family Friend and Neighbor Care, where around 2000, a little bit more or less, a group of community-based organizations in the Seattle-King County area and our organization got together, and we're trying to figure out some ways to support young children who were not in formal early learning, so licensed childcare, Head Start, early Head Start, any other sort of preschool type programs. And we realized that there were at least about 75% of young children in Washington state that were not in formal care. So we looked at many different approaches and tried different things, and this group decided that a play group would be the best way to reach folks. So we did a formal launch in 2006, and we went through sort of a research and development phase for the first 4 or 5 years, where we tried many different things, many different ways of operating play groups, and did some evaluation along the way to see what things worked for families and what didn't, and came up with a set of guidelines and what we call essential activities that seem to be the best format for offering a play and learn type of group that would both help support the young children as well as their caregivers and parents. And we formalized that structure in 2011, especially following a pilot study that we did using some normed tools, normed assessments, ones that had been used in different types of early learning settings, as well as ones that we needed to develop too. And they showed really positive outcomes. So in addition to the outcomes that we had been experiencing all along. So we kind of formalized that whole structure, put together materials that support both the organizations that are hosting the Kaleidoscope Play and Learn groups as well as facilitators, and standardized a facilitator training, and came up with some other handbooks and evaluation practices. And then we achieved a promising practice designation from the University of Washington in 2013. So that's just a very brief history of the program. So Kaleidoscope Play and Learn is really grounded in research as well as practice too. And at the bottom of the pyramid here, you'll see that it's really based on, from the very beginning, some widely recognized research that's been done about child development, about early learning, family engagement, family support, group theory and practice, and adult learning. And then throughout our time of operating play and learn groups and evaluating them, we did a lot of evaluation, and then the pilot study, and that led to us having those guidelines and quality and fidelity assurance practices that I just explained. So our theory of change that we operate under has a large and lofty goal of having all children in safe and nurturing environments, so that they're ready for kindergarten and beyond. And we do that through these steps. The play and learn groups provide family, friend, and neighbor caregivers and parents with information, resources, support, and connections so that those caregivers can provide high quality childcare and development opportunities while the child is in their care. And we realized early on that we really needed to have a strong focus on the caregiver learning component of the program, because we understood that while children come to the play and learn group once a week for a couple of hours, that they're with their caregiver for a lot of hours throughout that week. And that's where we could have the greatest impact, is if those parents and caregivers are doing things that support the child's healthy development and early learning during that time. So this is a pie chart that just describes a week in the life of a young child, sort of a typical young child, 0 to 5, where about half of their time is spent sleeping. And then the the child and caregiver are attending a 2-hour long play and learn group, about 1% of their time is spent doing that. And then there's this other 49% when they're awake and with that parent and or caregiver. And it's in that 49% time when there could be the greatest impact made. So that's part of the reason why we focus so much on the caregiver as well as the child in this program. So in a typical group, um, most of them are meeting 90 minutes or more, 90 minutes to 2 hours long. And the items highlighted are written in red font on these slides, on the next couple of slides, are those that are essential activities. So this is what every Kaleidoscope Play and Learn group does. So to be considered Kaleidoscope Play and Learn group, a group needs to meet at least weekly for 90 minutes or more. And the weekly frequency came from our evaluation information. The results were showing that families had good and consistent outcomes from the first few visits to a play and learn group, but the more often they participated, the stronger the caregiver and parent learning outcomes were. So we figured that it was best to have the groups meet at least weekly so that we could have the greatest impact with families. And then most groups have like an arrival time where people are coming and gathering. And during that time, there are activities set out for young children. There's sort of a child-directed playtime. There might be some play centers that are laid out on a floor of a conference room or wherever the group happens to be meeting. And during that time, families are playing with their young children and the facilitator is circulating, talking with the families and providing some information about how children learn from play and what they're learning while they're playing. Um, then there's usually a cleanup time and then always a coordinated group activity. And again, this is one of our essential activities. And this could take the form of a story time or a circle time. It could also be making a snack together or taking a walk in the park, or as in the picture on this slide, you can see they're doing some exercises and stretches. They were doing kind of like a kids yoga kind of thing. Um, and then usually there's cleanup where everybody has a hand in doing that, and then time for saying goodbye. And we leave the sort of flow of the group up to each individual group, as long as there are these components as part of it. If they wanted to have several group activities or one or two group activities, they want to sort of switch around when they do cleanup or when they want to do their group activity, then that's completely left up to the individual group, just based upon what they think is going to work best for the families that they hope are going to attend or that are attending their group. Then throughout the group time, these are other essential activities that are happening. So the facilitator has always had some sort of planned intentional caregiver learning about whatever topic seems to be most relevant to the families that are attending. It could be anything from, you know, helping families learn more about how children learn to read and what early literacy looks like, early math skills look like. Could be about toilet training or discipline or home safety, really based on what the caregivers and excuse me, parents are interested in learning more about. And the intentional caregiver learning happens in a very organic conversational manner. Um, there really isn't time built into most Kaleidoscope Play and Learn groups for the adults to be separate from the children. So again, it can happen while the families are playing together during that child-directed free play time, or it could happen also during the group activity time where the facilitator points out a few different things about why she chose the types of activities that she had out for the children that day, and gives a little soundbite messages about what children learn, and then some ideas for caregivers and parents what they could do at home to continue that kind of learning wherever they happen to be with the child. Then the facilitators also helping the caregivers get to know each other. And this we learned from our evaluation was a really important component for parents and caregivers, that they felt like the social networking part of the program was really helpful to them. So we decided to build that as part of the program too. And again, helping caregivers to get to know each other, very simple, from just introducing folks to one another and providing opportunities for them to have conversations with each other, especially like during that child-directed playtime is when families can exchange ideas about whatever the topic of the day is, or just share resources, advice, support. And then the last piece, the last essential activity is the facilitators looking for opportunities for the caregivers and parents to have leadership within the group. And again, this is very flexible based upon the participants that are there and the kinds of opportunities that there might be. So it could be inviting a caregiver to sing a song in their home language, or telling a story, planning an activity, or even doing some outreach and trying to find other families to, excuse me, to come to the group. So again, very flexible based upon what sort of skills and interests there are within the group. Then we have some key messages that we want caregivers to walk away from each group session having a feeling or a sense or knowing about. And really the most important one is that they have an important role in children's early learning and healthy development and school readiness, and that we value their role as a caregiver and parent. And giving them then some information about how children learn through play, relationships, and interaction. And for some communities, even knowing that children are learning as soon as they're born or even before they're born is important. And they don't have to wait until they get to school to start learning. In fact, they're learning all the time, whether we know it or they know it. And the other key message is that we really want to honor caregiver and parents' skills and expertise in raising children. And just to let them know that they don't need to have like an advanced degree to have a positive impact. And they're probably already doing some things with their child that is having a positive impact on their early learning. And so we want to encourage them to keep doing those things and give them some new ideas of other things they can do as well. And then giving them some understanding about why they're doing those things and why it's helpful to play peekaboo with a baby, or to play games about matching shapes, or I Spy, or telling stories and singing songs together, and how that supports early learning. And we also want folks to know that they don't need to have expensive toys, that they have what it takes, in their kitchen, in their linen closet, in the park. And we try to model that too in our groups, where groups will use maybe some toys, some really nice blocks or dolls or things like that, but then mix in some household items too, so that families can see that, oh, I can do this at home too. We really want to have them feeling like encouraged and ready and able to do stuff at home. And then helping them understand those everyday activities that we do in our daily routines and see them as teachable moments. So thinking about how a trip to the grocery store or getting ready in the morning, getting dressed, can support early learning. So counting buttons on a shirt when you're getting dressed, or talking about colors or the weather and which kind of outfit is going to best fit the weather, or looking at shapes and colors, or making a list for the grocery store trip, all those sorts of things, so that so that folks don't feel like they have to have like block out special time during their day, but using those times when they're already with the children just to be a little bit more intentional about those moments and seizing them. So groups meet anywhere people pay, play, or pray, work, or live. We've got groups in community centers, in libraries, schools. This one in the photograph happened to be at a shopping center. We've got a couple of groups in shopping centers. Um, they Groups don't need to take place in areas set up for young children. As you can see in the picture here, this was simply a very empty, very bare meeting room in a shopping center, and it just happened to have some tables that could be lowered to kid size, and got some activities on the floor and some on the tables. Um, and again, this is partly due to our hope that families are starting to understand that children are learning everywhere, and they don't need to have that sort of fancy setup or a classroom to learn. And also, as importantly, maybe even more importantly, is that we want groups to be in locations where it's very easy for families to get to. 'Cause the types of families that we've been trying to reach often don't have transportation, or they're relying on the bus or their own 2 feet to get to some place. So having some place that's really convenient for them to get to with the young children in their care is really important. And our groups tend to operate on a free basis. We don't have any groups at this point that are charging. And most operate also on a drop-in basis, not a drop-off basis, but a drop-in where there's no pre-registration, and where families feel free to just show up when it works for them. And we found that a lot of our groups found that through experience, that having registration was sometimes a barrier for families, in that they felt like they couldn't make a commitment. And so having just the groups operate on a drop-in basis has worked best for families to show up. And families do tend to consistently come to the group without having to register. So they kind of make that commitment themselves, and to themselves and to the child to come to the group. And most groups operate on a year-round basis. Some do follow a school schedule. We have had groups that have stopped and started or met for sort of a short period of time, for like 3 or 4 months. But I think the most effective groups kind of just operate on an ongoing basis, where they meet once a week throughout the year, maybe take some breaks, again, maybe following the school calendar, but families will know that the group is going to be continuing throughout the year. And again, I think this has worked really well in terms of retention of families, and helping them to commit too. So just some quick facts and figures about our groups here in Washington State. We work with 40 community organizations. Some of them are school districts, or family serving organizations, or those that are based in different ethnic and cultural communities, and libraries. Those are our community partners who actually run the groups. And we have about 120 or more groups that meet weekly in the state. And groups are facilitated in 12 different languages. At this time, we have many more languages represented in the participants that come, but these are the languages that the groups are actually facilitated in. And we have them in all sorts of different kind of geographic locations. So we've got them right in Seattle, in the heart of Seattle, in more rural parts of the state, where, in small school districts where there's maybe 1 or 2 elementary schools, suburban, those ex-urban areas too. And so it seems to work really well regardless of those sort of geographic kinds of locations. And last year we had about 4,500 families that attended annually, and that's an unduplicated number. and 45 or 53, excuse me, percent were low income, 60% were people of color, and 47% spoke a language other than English at home. So this was from our data from 2015. And we also have partnerships with organizations in California, Iowa, North Carolina, Ohio, and Kentucky that offer groups too. So some of the results from our most recent outcomes evaluation in 2015 are these. We look at changes in caregiver behavior. And so 83% of the caregivers and parents indicated they talked more often with the children in their care about numbers and shapes and sizes. 82% described things they do and see with their children more often. And 88% gave their children more opportunities to learn and try new things. And these are some of the many indicators that we have. And we do a once a year survey with all of the adult participants, and then all of the groups participate in that, and we compile the data statewide. And so this is our statewide results. And part of these indicators, some of these indicators were ones that we worked with school districts here locally to see what they felt were some things that led up to school readiness. And then we also look at changes in caregiver social support. Again, this being an important component of the program. And now that we've learned about the Strengthening Families protective framework several years ago too, having a strong social support network is one of those protective factors. So I think this is an important piece of the program. So 86% said they participated more in community activities or services to help their children learn and be healthy. And for many of the families we work with, this may be their first entree into any sort of early learning or any other type of family support too. And then 89% of the caregivers and parents said they felt more supported as a parent or a caregiver in their community, which I think is fairly significant. So questions, and yes, I can see your questions. That's great. And yes, I see a question about the PowerPoint too. And there is a PowerPoint, there's a handout section on your GoToWebinar panel there. And if you can't download it there, I'll go ahead and send this to Diane Conrad, and she can email out the PowerPoint as well to anybody that wasn't able to capture it. And just to let you know too, I'm recording this, so if you have colleagues or folks that you would like to get this information, we'll make this available too. So feel free to type any questions in your question box there, and I'll just give you a couple moments to think about questions so far. Great, so I have a question about what is the average group size? You know, groups vary anywhere from like 2 or 3 families that are consistently attending to some that have 30 or 40 families, and that gets to be pretty big, because if you think of it as 30 or 40 families, there's at least, you know, 1 child per adult that's coming. I think the ideal group size is more within the 10 to 15 families that attend. So again, if you're thinking in pairs of caregivers and children, that would be like 20 to 30 people, plus, you know, some extra children that would be attending. And I think aiming for 20 or so families as consistently attending is a great way to get that sort of average 10 to 15 size, because we find that while folks attend fairly regularly, there are some weeks that they can't make it because of whatever else is happening in their life, doctor's appointments, or somebody's sick at home, or something happens that they can't make it. Are there ways that social and emotional health are addressed Yes, yes. And I'm thinking about social emotional um, health of both the children as well as the adults. And actually, one of the essential activities that wasn't highlighted, or I didn't include on the slide, was that it's an opportunity for young children to interact with their peers. And so there's a lot of guidance that the facilitator provides in helping young children learn how to interact with their peers, learn how to share, take turns, things like that. And so that's one component of social emotional health. And then the other piece is that we do have some lesson guides that are available for facilitators that cover many different topics, and social emotional health is one piece of that. So how to support young children, learning to talk about their feelings, learning to identify them, learning how to make friends and play with friends, um, and those sorts of things. And then in terms of the adult component for social emotional health too, I think that network of support is really key, as well as the facilitator being able to walk alongside with families if there are issues, and providing referrals for support if a caregiver or a child is needing to have extra support, of making those kinds of referrals. So those are some ways that social emotional health is supported. And then got a question about what the targeted age group is. Our groups are mostly birth to 5 or 6, just as children are getting ready to go into kindergarten, um, whatever age that happens to be. So we have had groups that have targeted age groups for the children, and some still operate with that. But what we found is that families will attend with whoever happens to be at home. So even if you have a group that's for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, there might be some babies and some toddlers that are coming along too, because we want this to be as open for everybody. And then also, during school breaks, might have some school age kids that are coming as well. So we're trying to, again, to reduce barriers for families to participate. And then there's a question about the time of day that has been ideal. For us, I, I think almost 90% of the groups are in the morning, usually sometime after school age kids are either on the bus or been dropped off at school, and then before lunchtime. So a lot of the groups meet somewhere between 9:30 and noon or 12:30. And that also seems to happen to be the time when the young kids are they're freshest too, and um, they they are most alert and awake. We have had groups that meet in the afternoon, some in the evening as well too. So it's really just what's going to work for that particular group of families. And then there's a question about startup kit and curriculum guidelines ideas. Yes, I'll talk about that in a few minutes too. Thank you. Your questions are coming fast and furious. That's great. So keep typing them in. I'm going to catch up and read some of them. Are there materials given to parents providers such as handouts about readiness? Yes, we do in our lesson guides and some other kits. We do have some information about um, early learning and school readiness, and we've also worked with some school districts here that have their own handouts about it, and they've used the play and learn groups as a way to get information about sort of what their list of ideal kindergarten readiness skills are. And then how many staff in addition to the facilitator do you recommend? Most groups usually have just one facilitator. We do have some groups that have two, and usually the groups that have two, it's because they are looking at having multilingual groups, and so they might have 3 or 4 languages between the two facilitators, so that they can better support the families that are attending. But most groups operate with just one facilitator. Any other questions? and keep them flowing. I'll pause periodically throughout the rest of our time and answer questions. So switching gears here of thinking more in terms about what it takes to actually run a Kaleidoscope Play and Learn group. These are sort of my frequently asked questions about what's the budget? How much does it cost? And so on this slide, you'll see kind of a list of what you might want to put in your budget. And this would be for a group that is ongoing and established. I mean, you want to think about your facilitator pay, and then whatever program manager you might have that's involved as well. Some durable equipment, replacing toys and supplies and materials. Then having some kind of activity supplies, so those markers, glue, paper, things that you typically run out of. And I would say most groups budget anywhere between $10 to $25 per group for activity supplies. Really depends upon the size of the group and then how much stuff of that you use. Then you want to think about other types of supplies that you want to have on hand. So cleanup supplies if you need to clean up, pens, paper, all those little kinds of things. And then space rental. I think most of our groups, probably 99%, have free space, access to free space. So usually that's not a concern. And you're working with schools, so I'm thinking you might have space in schools or libraries or maybe even with Head Start classrooms too, if they're not running full 5-day-a-week schedules. Sometimes those spaces are available, or community centers, apartment complexes, those kinds of places. Usually groups can find free space. And then any mileage that you might be paying a facilitator, and other miscellaneous costs. So thinking about additional training for facilitators or copying and doing outreach, things like that. And then we'll talk about the Kaleidoscope Play and Learn affiliate license and materials fees too. And I'll talk in just a moment more about the facilitator time too. So startup costs, and these are sort of those one-time costs for each group that you would want to start. Think about the kind of staff time investment that it will take to plan for the group, to make those partnerships with different organizations to do outreach or to find space, to do any fundraising you might need to do, hiring, training, orienting your facilitators, doing the outreach, getting materials put together, and think about who on your team would be responsible for doing that. How much of that might you delegate to the facilitator? And then thinking about the durable equipment, so gathering that initial stock of the toys and materials that you'll have for each group. And again, because we have such an emphasis on using materials found in the home, you can shop at thrift stores or garage sales or wherever to get pots and pans and nice lightly used bed sheets that you can use for parachutes or making tunnels or whatever. And then spending a little bit of money on a couple of nice block sets, maybe some books, if you don't have those in your other resources available, as well as maybe some dolls or puzzles and things like that are always nice to have to supplement those household materials. And I hear everything from like $500 to maybe $1,500 to buy that stock of toys and equipment. And then those activity supplies, so getting that starter set of markers, paint, paper, maybe another, $100 or $150 worth of supplies. Then thinking about those other supplies that you want to have on hand too, you might consider getting a first aid kit just to have on hand if you don't have one in the facility where the group will be happening, and then any other sort of miscellaneous costs. So the biggest factor in the budget is really the facilitator, and paying for them and paying for their time. And organizations will handle this differently based upon their pay structure or their employment arrangements with the facilitator. Some have facilitators where they have a full-time job with that organization, and maybe facilitating the play and learn group once a week is part of that job. It could be a family support worker, or even in some cases kindergarten teachers or Head Start teachers that are facilitators as well. And then there are other groups that hire a facilitator just on a per group basis. So it might be a community member that that doesn't necessarily want to have full-time work, or that the organization doesn't have the funds to employ somebody full-time, but they can hire them to run the group. And so again, I mean, this is kind of the wild card factor based upon who you think would be the best fit for your organization and what fits with your wage and salary scales. Would they be getting benefits or not? But one thing I really encourage you to think about when you're looking at the facilitator role is thinking about that role, not just in terms of what time they spend in the group, that hour and a half to 2 hours in the actual group time, but to also consider that there's some planning time that needs to happen to make sure that the intentional caregiver learning pieces built into what they're doing and gathering of supplies. And then, if there's some setup time that needs to happen, if they're walking into an empty room where they need to do some setup with putting toys and materials out, um, and if you're paying for drive time as well. And again, these are the sorts of decisions that you need to make based upon your organization's circumstances. And then there's the time in the actual group. And then afterwards, how much cleanup time do they need to have? How much packing up and putting away things in drive time? And then we also really encourage you to plan in time for your facilitator to do some follow-up and some reflection after each group time. So there might be some questions that excuse me, parents or caregivers ask during the group that the facilitator wants to follow up on, getting them more information or helping them to make a referral. And then just some reflection on what worked well, what didn't, what might they want to try differently next time. And then in the block below in this illustration is just some other odds and ends tasks that facilitators often are taking part in. So there might be some record keeping administrative tasks, additional trainings, or they needing to do supervision with a program manager, any sort of extra documentation. Have you built into their role doing outreach or other sorts of activities like fundraising or little PR types of things? So think about that, all of those components when you're putting together your idea of what the facilitator role is in your organization. And we figure that for most weekly groups, the facilitator actually ends up spending about 5 to 6 hours of time of both planning, getting there, doing the group, cleaning up, and then doing those miscellaneous tasks. And there's some efficiencies of scale that can happen. So if a facilitator is leading one or more than one group each week, he or she can use that planning time to plan for both of those groups too. So there is a little bit more efficiency in that time if that person's running two, 3, or 4 groups each week. So these are important pieces. And again, this is like the biggest piece of the budget too. So really give this some consideration when you're thinking about what it will cost your organization or your school district to run the groups. And I'm often asked too, what to look for in a facilitator. And I think the soft skills are for this particular type of program are more important than even having a lot of background and information in child development. I think for me, the ideal person would be somebody who knows the community that you're trying to reach, hopefully lives in that community. They share the language and the culture with who you hope is going to be attending the group. Somebody who's really likes to be with people and could help to create that environment where everybody feels welcome and they feel comfortable working with people from different backgrounds and different ages. They can work with both adults and children, and they can work fairly independently too, because most facilitators are working alone in a group. They need to have some flexibility and some initiative and some organization skills to sort of make it all happen. Then also, that knowing their own limits and when to ask for help, because the families will start to see that person as an expert. And so we want people in facilitator roles who are able to say, I really don't know the answer to that, but let me find out. Instead of giving advice, which may not be very accurate or helpful. And then obviously somebody who's enthusiastic about the program is really helpful too. And because we've had groups here in Washington State for a while, a lot of our facilitators now were actually participants in the group. So that's a wonderful thing that once groups get established that you can see happen. And then they can be those enthusiastic supporters of the program, and they know what it's like to have been on the other side of that relationship. So the bonus qualities, I would say, if they have had some experience in caregiver or parent education and support and group facilitation, and then early learning and child development. But these are the types of skills that I think you would be well equipped to be able to help a facilitator build over time too. So you all have those kinds of resources and people in your organizations and your school districts that can help provide that kind of training and answer questions for a facilitator that might not have as much experience in these areas. So I'm going to just pause for see a couple of questions have rolled in here. So the program targeted to informal caregivers, family, friends, and neighbors. Yes, we do targeted outreach to family, friend, and neighbor caregivers, as well as parents, and we have about 26% of our adult participants are family, friend, and neighbor caregivers, and then the other 74% are parents. And when we first started this, we tried to be a little bit more exclusive of really focusing on family, friend, and neighbor caregivers. And then we realized over time that families' childcare situations were so fluid. So it might be that one week they're with grandma or an auntie or an older brother, and then next week they're with mom or dad. And so we wanted to make sure that we were being really inclusive of everybody. But pretty much, I would say almost all of the children that are attending are primarily at home with either a family member, parent, or a good family friend. And we can talk more at a later date about doing targeted outreach to family, friend, and neighbor caregivers, because they often get left out of the picture of programs that serve parents and families, but with just some very, very simple changes and modifications that we can make those programs more inclusive, and including Kaleidoscope Play and Learn. And then there's a question about data collection tools included in the startup materials. Yes, we do. We have a standardized outcome survey that the one that I talked about gets administered once a year. So we periodically update that, but that is also available in English as well as in several different other languages too. And we like to have a consistent data collection form, that survey form, so that groups can compare and contrast with what the overall global, at least in Washington State, the results are looking like. So those are kind of like our benchmark results. And then individual groups can compare and contrast and see which areas they're doing well at and which ones they might want to focus on for improvement over the next year. So feel free to keep typing those questions in, and I'll keep moving on here. So the Kaleidoscope Play and Learn affiliate package, and so if your organization is interested in running Kaleidoscope Play and Learn groups, we offer a package of services and materials, and it is a one-year license, and that's at least what we've talked about with Diane here, doing a one-year license or a one-year project with you all. And that would include a planning toolkit and a handbook. So this is more geared for the program managers, of people that would be setting up the program locally. It includes some information about hiring a facilitator. So there's the toolkit comes on a flash drive, so a thumb drive, so you have an electronic version of it, and there are like job descriptions for facilitators, interview questions, flyers translated into different languages that you can plug in your group information in. There's a prototype budget that you can just plug in your numbers in, that gives some guidance on what to plan for. So it comes with those sorts of things. As well as like a PowerPoint and some stock language that you could use for grant applications, or if you're needing to make a presentation in your community or with a board or somebody else. There's that PowerPoint in there too as well that you can modify for your particular community. And then it also comes with another set of materials, our caregiver learning handbook and lesson guides. And again, this is on a flash drive, so you can print out, and there's some pieces that you can modify. So we have lesson guides for about 45 different lessons, and the topics include early literacy, early math and science skills, child development, home safety, health and wellness. We just released a few new ones on supporting home language, which we're really excited about. So talking with families about the importance of supporting home language and how that supports children's early learning and the kinds of resources they might look for once the child enters school or as the child is entering school. And included in that package too are some handouts that you can give out to families related to the different topics. There's some posters that we have you could print out in different formats about what children learn and how caregivers can support them that you could display at different play areas. So there's one on what children learn, how to support them when they're playing with blocks, when they're doing sensory type of activities, when they're playing pretend, and all these sort of written in friendly language, trying to do away with jargon. So the sensory ones would be talking about when your child is playing with different textures and sand or water or different types of things. And these again are translated into 10 or so different languages too. And then the package would also include, we have facilitator training webinars that happen quarterly, so different topics that facilitators have said that they are interested in learning more about, and then we archive these and upload them to our YouTube channel so folks can take part in those. And then we've talked too with Diane, Conrad, and folks there about the possibility of us coming to you to do the full 2-day facilitator training as well too. So that would be included. and then the evaluation piece of it too. So that's how that's sort of how we work with the kind of package and information and materials and support that we give to the different organizations that are providing play and learn groups or Kaleidoscope play and learn groups. Let's see. I've got another question here, and feel free again, type in those questions. Other than the qualities you already mentioned, are there any education requirements for facilitators? No, we don't have any additional education requirements. We really wanted to leave this fairly wide open for local communities to figure out what is going to work best and who is going to work best for the facilitator role. When we didn't want to exclude people that might not have a lot of formal education, because that might exclude folks that represent the communities. So got a question about the annual cost. So the annual cost for the license package is $1,300. And then the annual cost to run a group, and this is what you would need to build into your budget, we hear anywhere, again, there's a range, $10,000 to $15,000. And again, that's really based upon the facilitator pay and how they get paid. And is the group running 9 months a year, or is it running 12 months a year? Any other questions? I'm going to try once again and see if I can see if I can unmute you all. Yeah, not being able to do that, but please feel free to keep typing those questions in. And these are just questions here for you to consider is, if you're thinking about Kaleidoscope Play and Learn, how does it fit in your organization goals and other programs, to make sure it is a good fit? And if you think it might be, what kind of resources might be available already to support your getting a group started, and support maintaining that group too. So like I said, you all have some early learning expertise, so having that kind of expertise on hand is really helpful. You probably already have some connections with families, so that is also really helpful. And are there other sorts of expertise or resources, space? I mean, borrowing materials from another program can always help too. So, I mean, does this fit in with other early learning activities or school transition activities that you're engaged in? So think about those sorts of things as you're considering this. And then, yeah, anything else you'd like to know about Play and Learn. So yeah, keep typing away, or any comments, questions, thoughts. And I think Diane Conrad sent out a link to a video, like a brief 5-minute video that has an overview of the program. A lot of the same information we covered today, but that's also available if you want to take a look at that, and I can resend out that link. It'll give you a little bit more idea of seeing some groups in action, what it can look like. Other thoughts, questions? I'm just pausing to make sure you're getting time to type away. And Diane, any questions or thoughts you want to pass on to folks too? Let's see if I can. Oops. All right. So I'm not seeing any other questions, but like I say, feel free to just get a hold of me if you have any additional questions. This last slide has my contact information on it, um, and you can call me or email me at any time. No worries about that. Oh, seeing a couple more questions coming in. So, oh, hi, Diane. Oh, good, good. So Diane is coming in as Teresa. Let me try to unmute you.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, Diane, I can hear you. Can everybody else hear Diane too?
Yes.
So Diane, you had a question about clarifying how many facilitators can be trained at once.
Right.
And
I was just trying to get a good number of what you thought that would look like.
yeah, yeah. You know, we can do 25 up to maybe about 30. 25 is more ideal of facilitators at once. And, I think for the training to really be effective, we need sort of a little bit of a critical mass, maybe 10 to 12 as a minimum.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know it's a 2-day. What kind of hours are we looking at? We've had a lot of questions about what those days would look like.
Sure, sure. So usually it's about 7 hours
Okay.
each day,
Okay.
and that includes a break for lunch.
Okay.
So it's a pretty full 2 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, I know we talked. So included with that 1,300 a year, that is the license. How many people will be able to facilitate under one license?
You can have as many facilitators as you wish. And we only ask just for our kind of quality assurance, fidelity insurance um, that at least one of those facilitators has attended the 2-day training.
Okay.
So there's always a lead facilitator that's completed the 2-day training.
Yeah. Yeah, our goal is to have all of the facilitators that would have the training.
That would be great. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts?
I think you've answered everything here from us at the ESD.
Okay. Great, great.
And we'll kind of get, we have 5 or 6 different sites right now that are on. And so we'll get in touch with others that are not here with us and kind of, come up with some things that I can talk to you further about and maybe get a date set up depending on, how much interest. I know here at our site we're pretty interested.
Great. Yeah, yeah, and that's wonderful. And like I say, I've recorded the webinar and we'll post it up. So if you know of any other folks that want to get that information, they can take a look at it. Or
Yeah, that would be great. Would you be able to send me the link to that?
yeah, I can send you the link and I can send you also the PowerPoint too, if folks weren't able to grab it off of the webinar today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Lisa.
You bet.
This is Mary Curtis Gramley. I'm the director of the program, and I've appreciated being able to join in the group here to have the opportunity to learn more about it. So thank you so much for your effort. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for checking in about it too. So, okay. Well, if it sounds like there's no other questions or anything, then we'll sign off. But again, you all feel free to just get a hold of me if you have any questions, and hopefully you'll be getting some more information soon. So thank you so much, everybody, and maybe we'll see each other soon.